Pull on up a chair. You're at Camp Video Games, y'all.
Hello there, and welcome to Camp Video Games. I am Junior Counselor Sean, and joining me is Junior Counselor Josh.
Oh, hey campers. This is Camp Counselor Josh. If you find yourself at a point in the woods that to move forward, you have to wait for a very long time for, I don't know, like a branch, an animation of a branch to move out of your way before you can progress. Then you find yourself lost and you have to do that every 30 seconds or so. You might just want to give up on that hike. Start again in another video game generation or two.
Or you use that convenient time to take a sip of your beverage or to tell your loved ones how you feel about them. We're talking about Resident Evil today. Josh doesn't like it.
The original
okay.
Resident
I
Evil.
love Resident Evil. Okay. Camp Video Games. We talk about video games and video game adaptations, and we are starting our little mini series on Resident Evil. Now, you'd think, hey, should we start with the 1996 classic Resident Evil? No, we're not doing that because we have to link in a film adaptation. And to do that, we need to discuss first the Resident Evil 1 remake from 2002. Second, the Resident Evil 2 remake, which will be in a future episode. From 2019.
Yes,
so
sir.
that we can talk about the film titled Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, which is a movie. Okay. Little background.
A film which is a movie.
A little background with my relationship with Resident Evil. I was 10 years old when Resident Evil came out in 1996, do the math, and I've been a fan of the series ever since. You could even say I'm obsessed with this series. It has time and time again forced me to buy a new console so I could play the next game in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I can speedrun the classic games, and I am thoroughly enjoying my playthroughs of the new series. And I actually have even written a strategy guide for Resident Evil 1 1996 on how to best play through Jill's campaign. I'm a very dedicated Resident Evil fan.
Is it live on GameFAQs?
It's actually at gamerant.com if you want to look it up.
Yeah.
My name is Sean M. Peters. You can find the article.
I don't know why we don't lead with that every episode. I am Sean M. Peters from gamerant.com.
Because they don't
really published this one guide.
Well, if you look at my list of articles, it's all Resident Evil related because I was like, oh, I have an outlet to talk about video games. This is pre-Camp Video Games, folks. And I realized the only thing I wanted to talk about was Resident Evil. I even presented myself to the editorial board as I am a Resident Evil expert. And they were like, damn, dude, that's how you're introducing yourself.
Wait, what year approximately are we talking?
2019.
Oh, okay. So, like, the reason I ask is because if it had been 10 years earlier than that, you would come off even more a little maybe neurodivergent, where, like, everyone wasn't aspiring to be an expert at every series on YouTube and try to get to 100,000 subscribers.
Oh, they'd be like, what's up with this guy and his, like, lack of
like, it was
eye contact, and why is he, like...
like, if you were a online expert of a video game before, like, the early 2010s, when YouTube was such a thing, it was because you were truly just a psycho for the shit.
Yeah, and I really am. I am a die-hard Resident Evil fan. Josh, tell me about your long and storied
it goes back
Evil.
way back to probably 1996 when it came out, and I saw a friend play it for 5 minutes when they rented it. And
how did it make you feel?
And then I never touched it again until about a month ago when you and I started playing it for this show.
Yes.
But I do want to. I want to speak on that for just a little bit. I don't know what in our trajectories as gamers made it that you are more of a Capcom boy and I'm more of a Squeenix boy.
Yeah.
Whereas you have crossed over and played some Square Enix stuff. I played Capcom stuff, but I never touched Resident Evil. It wasn't even in my purview marketing wise.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I was like, oh, fuck Resident Evil. It was just, like, not on my radar at all. It's something that, like, I'm going to want to play.
My relationship with Square Enix games goes back pretty. I mean, I played a lot of video games.
Yeah.
And like, I mostly just stuck with the like mainline Final Fantasy stuff. I think out of all of the games, I probably played Final Fantasy Tactics the most.
Yeah.
But
very good one.
I'd like to diversify my gaming experience.
Yeah, well, I guess I mean that to say, like, I was more like, I was JRPG obsessed. I was on rpgamer.com or .net, in like 96 on the forums.
That's right, campers. And if you want to listen to us talk a lot about RP Gamer and all of the greatness of Final Fantasy VII specifically, listen back on our series.
Yeah, and I don't know why that means Resident Evil was over here. Because when we talked about Tomb Raider, that is something I have a lot of experience with, which... like, it's funny because in playing the Resident Evil remake from what year was this from? The
2002.
Yeah,
and then it was remastered in 2015 or 2019, I believe.
Yeah, that's a very like early attempt at a remake and a remaster in like the history of gaming. That I'm glad. I'm just gonna say I'm glad I played the Resident Evil 2 remake quite a bit before we recorded this episode, because I didn't have much good to say about Resident Evil beyond like I don't know how obvious it is, but I mean there's definitely things I can say like from playing this original Resident Evil that like, oh, I understand what this did for gaming. I understand what it innovated, but it feels extremely like a prototype.
So I'm glad you brought
for things to come.
I'm glad you brought up remakes.
Yeah.
Because I have a list here of notable remakes that I was able to just kind of come up with at the top of my head. Because Resident Evil is a notable remake in gaming specifically.
Yeah, but I'll also note, like, I do have experience with survival horror in like I enjoyed Alan Wake 1 and 2 quite a bit because they're like purposely campy. I'm saying that purposely very campy.
Yeah.
And I've played enough of The Last of Us to understand the genre.
Yes.
And
let's break down what the genre actually is before we try to dissect it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like then going back to this, I got to see a lot of where the innovation started.
Yeah. Yeah. Survival horror as a genre is typically a third person, but it's ventured into first person very successfully with the newer Resident Evil games. And it's mostly about item/resource management.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
And jump scares and monsters and spooky scary. But okay, first, why Resident Evil Remake? I already told why we're talking about it today, but why like in the scope of video gaming and like A tier, what was the
AAA gaming
games? A lot of AAA games have been remakes. When I went way back trying to think of what is the first video game remake that I really remember playing, it would be the Mario 1 through 3 on Super Nintendo.
The All-Stars, Mario All-Stars.
Yeah. They just took the Super Mario what's the Super Mario Super Nintendo exclusive? Like they took that engine and they just applied it to the NES games.
Yeah. Yeah, they put the graphical framework over top of it. They sort of reskinned it.
Yes. Which
is funny because this is now like a top debate, I think, in like gaming cultures. Like, what's a remake? What's a remaster? So like, I would say that's mostly a remaster. It adds save slots, which is so like I think remake is when it's like you've changed the engine and added a lot of quality life stuff.
That is what Resident Evil 2002 is, a remake. It is not a remaster. They originally wanted to just do a shot-for-shot remake of the original game, but they knew that would not get the reception that they were hoping for because it would only appeal to diehard fans, and they wanted to get more people in and like not sell them the same game twice, essentially. Yeah,
and that speaks to like why I didn't really enjoy this, because I think the remake happened too soon to appeal to a modern gamer who didn't grow up with it. That as I was playing it, I did not feel my time was being respected by the game.
Which is it's a new concept in gaming, I think, is the respect of time, because now that adults are proudly playing video games, well, I don't know how proud I am of my lifestyle, but you know what I mean? Now that they're being catered to
I always try to remind myself, it's like, the average approaching middle-aged, white male is spending his entire Saturday and Sunday watching football. So it's like, how much worse is this?
No, we're doing great. Okay, more notable remakes. Metal Gear Solid got a remake for the GameCube as well, called Twin Snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And and then also Metal Gear Solid 3 is about to get a remake with the Metal Gear Solid Delta.
Yeah.
I reserve judgment until I play it. That's all I have to say. The trailer did not intrigue me.
My animated face does not do justice to my real life face.
Yes.
If you're watching on YouTube.
Josh, you look really worried.
Well, they fired Hideo Kojima like 7 or 8 years ago, and they said, we know how to remake his games.
Oh yeah, we don't need your artistic touch. We don't need the auteur of video games to make a good game. We got it. We'll take it from here.
I am quite hesitant about what that game will be and why they chose that one. But anyway, back to this game.
Final Fantasy Origins. So the Final Fantasy games, those were remakes as well. Or I guess you could say remasters.
I think
they touched up the graphics.
We had Final Fantasy Anthology and what was the other one? The PlayStation re-release.
Crystal Chronicles.
When they not Crystal Chronicles. When they finally brought Final Fantasy
4 and 5.
5. Yeah, 4, 5, and then was it 6 in Chrono Trigger or 4 in Chrono Trigger?
Yes.
Whichever one had
PlayStation.
That's like when they introduced the anime cutscenes in Chrono Trigger.
Love that.
And it introduced a few CGI cutscenes in the other games. Like that's the hazy area between remaster and remake. There weren't like these massive quality of life features that we have now in the Pixel remasters.
I know. I've lost count.
There's no consistency of when we use this word remake, remaster. So I think that's the bottom line of this part of the discussion.
Sure. Just a couple other like notable remakes that like kind of came off my brain. Metroid Zero Mission is a true remake of the first game in the sense that they took the layout and the map of Metroid for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and they gave it the same engine as Metroid
Fusion, like one of the ones for
exactly the Game Boy Advanced ones, and they added a lot to it. They did a lot of quality of life improvements. If you haven't played Metroid Zero Mission, gang, give it a try. It's on the Switch online now, and it is a perfect Metroid game. It is absolutely perfect. It expands and it perfects while tweaking the original material. That is what a good remake does.
Mm-hmm.
The Ninja Gaiden trilogy for the NES got a remake or a remaster, I suppose, for the Super Nintendo, which was a really interesting way to play it.
At all.
Ninja Gaiden. We'll talk about Ninja Gaiden later this year, I hope.
Oh, that'd be great.
There's a really, really fun anime based on Ninja Gaiden. And then Pokemon, the original Red and Japanese Green, they got the GBA remakes or remasters with Fire Red and Leaf Green. Secret of Mana not recently, like in the last like 10 years got a remake.
Yeah, that one was trash.
Yep.
That was more a remaster of like they just tried to redo the graphics and sound design, but then there's something about the transition to the 3D model like characters just botched everything about the gameplay.
the aesthetic of the original Secret of Mana is why I still love it so much.
Yeah.
I just love Super Nintendo graphics. I love the sound chip. I love how the sound makes me feel. And I felt that remaster remake was missing a lot of the magic that made the original so special. This is why I feel kind of bad, Josh, for having you play Resident Evil for the first time. What? Because what's the best example? Okay, instead of having you watch the classic 1968 George Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
I mean, I've seen that.
Instead of having you watch that for the first time and be like, this is a zombie movie, I had you watch the 2004 Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead remake instead.
Which, you mean are you saying that as opposed to like the original PlayStation release?
Yes. But I already listed my reasons as to why we were playing these specific titles.
Yeah.
But I feel like what the remakes miss is the camp, like the pleasure of absurdity. The
Yeah.
Resident Evil remake takes itself way too seriously. And the
Yes.
original Resident Evil is a joy. It is silly. It is well lit. We'll get to the lighting in the Resident Evil games. But hold on.
Yeah, keep going.
what it when you try to it's like when you say something off mic and then you try to remember what you said and you try to replicate it and it comes off like you kind of get the point across, but it doesn't come off as like as astute as you first put it. It's the same thing where it's just like that's how the remake feels for Resident Evil. A lot of people have touted the Resident Evil remake as a perfect game, as a masterpiece, and they are wrong. And props if you love this game and if it's like the reason that you clicked on this video. We're not here to shit on it. We're here to talk about it critically. And I've beat this game dozens of times.
I mean, I'm here to apologize for all of your time lost to loading doors, but
there's something missing in this remake, and it is what I think a lot of people criticized the original for. Is that it didn't successfully scare you, but it made you kind of chuckle because they're like the voice acting in the original was notoriously like bad.
Which is funny because based on the performance in this one, I thought it was the original voice acting.
No.
Because it's almost like if I'm, and I believe you, I feel like and especially when you put it in the context of early 2000s, everything's deadly serious, action, violence,
that brown filter,
American
over
exceptionalism, brown, gray. That when they redid the voice performance, they probably tried to take it more seriously than the postmodern, ironic 90s.
Yes.
And I've seen enough footage of the original to see the difference in like lighting and color.
Yes.
To get that like campy silliness that maybe it started as a restriction of the hardware that you're developing for, but then it becomes a feature and not a bug.
Yes.
Kind
exactly.
of thing.
Very well put. So
see, I guess I could say nice things about something I had no pleasure spending time with.
The main thing I think that needs to be understood about Resident Evil as a series and as a title, as a standalone title, as the first Resident Evil game, 1996 for the PlayStation and later for the Sega Saturn, and you can play it on anything these days. You can play it on your freaking phone and on the Nintendo DS, but the original Resident Evil is a cult classic. And when you talk about cult classics, you're not talking about shiny produced things a lot of the time. You're talking about kind of punk rock aesthetic where like things are barely coming together. You're thinking Rocky Horror Picture Show. You're thinking
this thing could fall apart at any minute.
Exactly.
It's held together by mud and sticks.
And you like the Godzilla suits where you can see the zipper because it makes it that much more fun. There's a little wink where the audience feels like they're working alongside the director almost because they can see all of the mistakes or the inaccuracies or the
it's like we're here rooting for you, buddy.
Yes, exactly. And cult, camp, kish are all same playing field. I read a wonderful essay that I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show before, but Susan Sontag wrote an essay called Notes on Camp. And it is an incredible, like, later 20th century examination of like what is campiness, like why do gay people specifically like camp so much? Yeah, and it's almost actually our mutual pal CB turned me on to this, told me about
this piece.
This
That's
piece
great.
of writing.
Yeah, who by the way this is somebody I've known since we were 5 years old, and is like the epitome of like. They were just dialed in to early 90s like camp culture, Yeah. Like, at like, again, 5 to 7 years old.
Yeah. But what Resident Evil is. Okay, let's talk about Resident Evil and stop beating around the zombie bush.
Yeah.
Resident Evil is an amalgamation of like 100 horror and sci-fi movies. Just monster mashed together, and here's a new thing. It's Resident Evil. Resident Evil is Night of the Living Dead meets Jaws meets The Terminator meets Halloween meets freaking like I think that Capcom owes like James Cameron a lot of money just from like blatant like just we'll say light plagiarism in terms of how much they've borrowed from Aliens and from the Terminator, and just there's a lot. But that is what it really comes down to, is these are all movies that rely on shock factor and monsters. Like monsters are interesting. When I was 10 years old, I was like obsessed with like Scooby-Doo. I liked all the scary light scary stuff. You know, I was very easily scared as a kid. And you'll find this a lot where people who tend to have a very high like fear reaction gravitate toward scary media. And it's building up scar tissue in your heart where you are just trying to like you overexpose yourself to something so that it doesn't affect you the way it has in a way. And that's me with Resident Evil. This used to scare the shit out of me. It was a tense game. And in defense of the doors loading screens, which is now absent from modern games, it built so much tension because you don't know what's behind the door. And it gives you a moment to go, oh shit, like, okay. And then you enter the room and it's the suspense. It is suspense building, but it was actually just a practical way for them to not have a traditional loading screen in their large, somewhat open world type of game before open world was really a talking point, where you go into a mansion. What is Resident Evil? Let's talk about Resident Evil.
Yeah. Well, can I talk about like my history with like the sort of horror zombie genre as well? Just to put in context, I think what missed for me, especially by playing the remake, is that like I grew up loving George Romero movies, and what I loved, I loved the face value campy like absurd violence of them.
Yes.
But the fact that like each one is quote unquote about something, you know, it's like, oh, Night of the Living Dead it's a commentary on race, and I forget which one is like, maybe it's like
Dawn of the Dead's consumer culture. Right. Day of the Dead is isolationism and military. They're industrial
all like
complex.
These clear, like critiques of something.
Yeah.
And I don't, between this Resident Evil 1 remake we played and the Resident Evil 2 remake that I'm about halfway through, I am having a way better time with 2 hooting and hollering because I'm like, oh, this is about something.
And it's respecting your time.
And it's respecting my time helps too. But this first one, I'm going to use that word prototype again. It feels like I don't really know like what they're trying to say here or like any of that. And like the zombie genre was just way like I have zero taste for it anymore.
Yes. Like
by season 2 of The Walking Dead, I was like, this is for like lowest common denominator, like idiots.
Yes.
And anyone doing zombies since is like, yeah, it was like those, maybe the first season of Walking Dead and like the game Left 4 Dead, that was like the finish line of zombie, this is fun kind of thing about that genre.
Like any genre, you can get way too oversaturated with content. And zombies specifically were a huge inspiration to me as a creative. I mean,
same. I made a zombie movie in high school.
Same. And okay, so 2002, this remake comes out, and the zombie like phenomena like of the early 2000s started, I would say, with 2004's Dawn of the Dead remake. Like that really got people saying, oh yeah, zombie movies, you can make those cheap and just like pump them out, and people will show up because people like a scary, gory, good time. And whatever zombies mean, and this is a larger conversation that maybe we'll say for a different time, but like what do zombies represent to the human psyche is really just like, I want an excuse to shoot my neighbor in the fucking head. And like it
also
gives you
just quickly interject, Shaun of the Dead was a huge part of that moment.
I thought they made that movie for me.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you're a fan of the George Romero, oeuvre, you can check out my interview with Tom Savini over at citybeat.com. I made an excuse to interview Tom Savini because I'm a diehard fan. If you're not familiar with who Tom Savini is, he's responsible for all the gory special effects in Dawn of the Dead and moving forward. He directed the Night of the Living Dead remake in 1991. he's a master of cinema, and he's an incredibly nice guy too.
Mhm.
And zombies are a reset button on society, right? You know, when zombies attack, your credit score does not matter.
Yeah.
When zombies take over, the only thing that matters is survival.
Yeah.
Survival horror is a natural term for what Resident Evil is.
Yeah.
And what zombies do is they force you to revert to a primal state where you have to fight to live. You know, the strong kill the weak.
Mhm.
And you also have such a clearly defined villain in a zombie. They have no redeeming factors.
Yeah.
They are rotting flesh that is trying to turn you into rotting flesh. And the stigma of cannibalism is an incredibly important thing to consider as well.
Yeah. You know, it's like I'm gonna, if you don't mind, just because I didn't connect with this first Resident Evil game as much, but I was sort of playing Alan Wake and such alongside of it just to like immerse myself in the genre.
Sure. And I've never played Alan Wake, so I don't know what you're talking about.
And Alan Wake is like it's technically like a zombie survival horror, just like this, and The Last of Us is very zombie, whatever. So like, I think I connected more with Alan Wake because I don't enjoy going to that place that you're describing so much anymore.
Yeah,
as I did when I was a kid. It feels like more scary and real now. Maybe
see, Dawn of the Dead is like a movie I fall asleep to very frequently. The original 1970.
It feels like a more bleak thing that I'm like, I don't necessarily want to connect with by choice. Whereas Alan Wake, it's like what you're fighting, these like zombies, they call them Taken in that game. There's like a meta narrative, sort of not reason, but like there's a meta narrative thing going on where it's like, I don't know that this is even real per se. Like, it's not like, oh my God, civilization has collapsed. It's like, no, it's you going through this experience and the rest of the world is maybe not.
Interesting.
You know? Yeah.
I'll give it a try. I like that. The Evil Within is another somewhat frequent or recent series that is actually directed by Shinji Mikami, I believe, who directed the original Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, so that's, I think, something that I'm realizing is why I connect more with that one than the rest of this survival horror genre. And again, like putting this remake I played in 2002 when this idea of zombies was shifting away from like, it's camp, it's social commentary, to like, it's deadly serious. We're just want to scare the pants off you. Let's make it dark and gothic, and that is. The aesthetic, again, is less appealing than the probably OG would have been.
I should also mention I interviewed the author S.D. Perry, who is responsible for all of the novelizations of the Resident Evil games. And they shed a lot of light on like what it means to adapt a video game into a different medium, which if you've been listen along here at Camp Video Games, that is incredibly important to me. It is something that still like baffles and delights me as like, how do you do that? Resident Evil is a game about a bunch of super cops who go to an abandoned mansion while investigating a slew of murders, and they unwittingly find themselves fighting off the undead and other sorts of mutant monsters, while discovering that this was all caused by a mega pharmaceutical company called Umbrella. Mm-hmm. And Umbrella is we live here in Cincinnati, and our mega corporation is P&G.
Yeah.
And Kroger. It's like if P&G was secretly developing a mutant virus in their basement, and it breaks out and people start turning into zombies. And I mean, I'm
just laughing. I'm like summing up the plot of Resident Evil in one word: vexed.
Man, once we get to Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, the movie, well, there's a lot of pandemic talk in there too. So what this game really is first and foremost, I'm sorry to say this is propaganda.
Yeah, which again, I'm trying to stay away from talking about the 2 remake too much in this episode, but complete opposite.
Yes. Oh yes.
I'm like, why didn't Sean start me here? Does he not know me?
Well, because sometimes you got to get your feet dirty before you feel real clean. So to overly simplify it, I feel like that's the plot of Resident Evil, is that some super cops, uncover a secret laboratory in what was thought to be abandoned mansion, which was actually being used by researchers from the mega corporation Umbrella. And the thing that I like about Resident Evil is the continuity between the sequels, because again, like 10-year-old Sean is playing this game and reading the book that is based on it, and then reading the sequel, and they're like, hey, we've got the same characters. We got Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker, the whole gang. Now, you did not get far enough to know kind of the spoiler things about Resident Evil, but Albert Wesker, who's the head of the super cop team, which is called STARS, Special Tactics and Rescue Services. That's the super cops. Albert Wesker is secretly working for Umbrella. Oh my God. And and this is all kind of his fault. And so it's saying, like, you know what? Cops get dirty. You got some dirty bad cops in the town, and only the good cops can root out the bad cops.
Yeah. That's a familiar narrative. No, not a bad apple spoils the punch. No. A bad apple needs to be ganged up on by the other apples and removed from the tree individually.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way it really goes?
And you take the bad apple's pension.
I mean, I'm fine with that if they shot somebody's dog or something. I'd take all their pensions. Give it to people who do real jobs. Anyway.
Give it to their own house.
Or that. Yeah, like, as you were saying all that, I don't know how much of it is the campiness of the narrative in this first one, that like when I watch something as like campy and stupid as a zombie movie, I can't tell you a single character from like any George Romero movie. It's like they're more of like a like icing on a cake, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just like a smear of like vibes. I don't connect with characters in horror movies ever really. So like all this sort of lore stuff, I was just 0% interested in. Even in the second one that I'm enjoying, I'm not really like connecting to the characters the way I do, I'll say, Final Fantasy VII, because that's something we spent a lot of time covering.
That's a very character-driven story. This Resident Evil series,
and I'm a character-driven guy.
That's the difference between you and me. I don't care about people. I care about like what people are doing.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just say, I am not like a lot of people in the sense that I truly care about these characters. And it's funny, but I also have my justifications. Like I've already like laid out, like I am a super fan of this series, and I have gone the extra mile to interview the author who gave real personalities to these characters. That I really can thank Resident Evil and S.D. Perry, the author, for reigniting my love of literature and for inspiring me to like treat art as not just something you have to do in a classroom, but as something that you can use to express yourself and to appreciate and to dissect and to criticize on a podcast. With Resident Evil, these super cops, they uncover this mystery, and it's a mystery too, because you don't know what's going on as you're playing. They're not saying the T virus has turned everybody into zombies.
Yeah.
One of the great functions of the Resident Evil, and we should talk about the gameplay at some point too.
Yeah, we'll get there.
One of the great features of Resident Evil as a series is you find journals and diaries and memos and emails all around, and there's a novel packed into this game.
And I'll say that while I wasn't really connecting with them much in this first go around of Resident Evil, again, I can respect this was an early implementation of something that's in every goddamn AAA game now,
Yep.
where they want to try to fill out lore, fill out a world. Like, how do we do that? Just leave stuff lying around that people can listen to or read on their own time if they want more.
Yes. And I think Skyrim's a great example of games that give you the option to read through stuff, and it's not necessary for the game to proceed necessarily, but it can add so much.
Right. I mean, I just finished Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree add-on. I told myself I'm done with this game 10 separate times.
It's like this toxic X that you keep going back to.
Yeah, and I looked
you
at my
up, babe?
When I finally finished it and beat the final boss of the expansion, I was 150 hours. And that game is like, if you don't, which I don't really do, I've learned to appreciate it through watching people's YouTubes. Like, you have to read all these item descriptions that tell you the history of the world. It's like you're learning, it's like this biblical level sort of lore that you learn through item descriptions. And I don't know that this game was definitely not the very first to do it, but of things that are mega AAA series, this is a very early adopter or progenitor of that format. And it's I can appreciate that. Again, I didn't really connect with it until the second game.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I get it. It's here. I see it,
I should also give a shout out to I went through a wonderful audiobook called Itchy Tasty, which is an unofficial history of Resident Evil by Alex Anil. It's free for Audible users if you have it. It shows up on your list. I didn't recommend it to you, Josh, because I don't think you care enough about it to listen to in-depth sales analysis of Resident Evil as a series. But funny enough, Resident Evil 2 in 1998 for a time outperformed Final Fantasy 7 in sales.
That's fascinating.
And it's this is it's a huge series.
Yeah, and I'm in no way downplaying that. yeah,
right. You can't argue with the numbers.
No.
And Resident Evil is the reason Capcom is still going.
Yeah. And I also I want to put this game in the perspective of the time where there weren't as many adult gamers with disposable income. You're either a high school kid saving up your money from your shitty job, or your parents are buying it for you for Christmas or whatever. And it's I'm going to dissect every inch of this mansion.
Absolutely.
And I get why that's exciting at the time.
I know this mansion better than my own home at this point. I could draw an overhead map by memory of the Spencer mansion.
And as an adult approaching it for the first time with 20 years of game development and tweaks, you go, okay, just feed me what's important.
Well, it's there was a great interview with Muhammad Ali where they were do you think you could stand up against the old greats in boxing?
Mm-hmm.
And he basically, I can't verbatim because this is off the top of my head, but he basically equated it was boxing was a different game when they were at the top. They used to just stand there and trade punches. There was absolutely no dancing.
Right.
And he's I have changed the game of boxing.
Yeah.
To where, yes, I would demolish this men because I've learned from them.
Yeah, that dancing point is very, I think, specific to the gap between this remake and the 2 remake in 2019. There was one other thing I was going to say also that I think drew me in more to 2 than this is the writing in the sort of found lore, whatever we want to describe that as. There were moments here where I was it's I don't know if it's this serious, this reskinning of the game is a very serious gothic that pulled me out of the campiness of it, but there's somebody's journal where you're it's a day by day as they're adopting the virus, and the last journal entry is he's it's taking me and writes it. I was okay.
Well, so you might be referencing what's called the Keeper's Diary.
I don't know. Yeah.
And that's there's a short film, fan film that was released that is basically chronicling that scientist's experience.
That's amazing.
And because if I'm remembering correctly, the diary is basically like, you know, apparently there was something like day one. Apparently something weird happened down in the labs, and now they got everybody quarantining. Day 2, I got this bad rash, and it's like starting to itch.
Guy.
Day 3, I hate this guy, and like he's such a jick. I think he cheats at cards. Day 4, like, oh, the doctor said we don't need to wear these like environmental suits anymore, and like just to like put a band-aid on our rash. Day 5, me hungry.
Yeah.
Day 6, itchy, tasty, me eat bad man.
Yeah.
Itchy tasty. That's the title of the book that I just referenced.
Okay.
It's a part of the game. It is just such an important thing that like it is campy storytelling.
And
that's
right, with
from
this
the
serious
first one.
dark sheen over it, that might have skewed my receptance or willingness to receive it as intended, because I was like, why? Like, because I feel like this like graphical treatment in the like remake, right, wants me to take it all very seriously.
Yes.
And I'm like, why is this guy writing about, like, he's writing in zombie voice?
Yeah, I know.
It's so silly. Just
wait until we watch Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, and you'll understand just like the way that you can misuse dramatic effect. It's shocking, actually. But Resident Evil uses these little narratives to just flesh out the world. It's telling you that there's more than this mansion that you're exploring. Let's talk about the gameplay. Let's get into actual gameplay of Resident Evil. You have the choice to play as 2 different characters. You can play as Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine.
Yeah.
And for Josh's playthrough, I recommended he play through as Jill Valentine, specifically because she is the unofficial easy mode of the game, and she gets 8 item slots, whereas Chris only gets 6.
Yeah,
there's other differences in their gameplay as well, where Jill comes equipped with a lockpick and Chris comes equipped with a lighter. Both are items that will just save you a few steps compared to the other playthrough. Whereas Chris's lighter does not take up an item slot, and it is an essential item in the game, which is great. Whereas Jill needs to sacrifice one of her 8 item spots for the lighter. We'll get into it, I guess. But when you choose to play as Jill, you are going through Jill's campaign, which is happening simultaneously through Chris's campaign, although there are some like incontinuities in terms of how things would happen, but that's just the way it is. Who actually cares? Only me. But Jill is a member of the Bravo team of the Stars, the Super Cops, and of the Alpha team. The Bravo team went in to investigate a murder, and their helicopter crashed, and they are all missing. So the Alphas go into shout out Alphas Improv. The Alphas go in to find their Bravos, the little guys, the JVs, and Resident Evil uses what is typically called tank controls, where I press forward, and no matter what camera angle you're looking at, Jill's going to walk forward. There are different control modes that you can activate for the remake, where you can have like what would that be, like real time, like
they just call them modern controls.
Controls.
They're pretty bad.
It's bad, and actually it's
same thing. We went through the same thing with Tomb Raider.
Yeah, and the
like
real time
game
controls
is built around this.
Will break Resident Evil. Like you can dodge zombies so easily with the real, or what was it, modern controls? With modern controls, you can just circumnavigate zombies so easily. But okay, Jill.
Well, I just like want to speak on the tank controls, because this is and the static backgrounds, which are I think like beautifully and lovingly done. Like I could admire this idea of the camera placement in each scene, like adding to the tension. But maybe you know where I'm going with this. I was frustrated so frequently when it'd be like, I can't see what's about to attack me, but the character would see it.
That's a feature, not a bug. That is something that
it drove me insane.
Capcom has addressed this.
Yeah.
And that is like, and I remember because if you follow along Carl's manager on YouTube, where junior counselor Josh will record his playthroughs, which were later you can access patreon.com/campvideogames.
Yeah, they go down after a while.
But I heard you talking through your Resident Evil 2 playthrough. You said something along the lines of like, I wonder what the flashlights are like in the original, if they're as like scary and like disorienting as they are in the,
because they do a lot of work in the remake.
Yeah,
especially for like the horror and atmosphere.
And the answer is there are no flashlights in Resident Evil 2 original. It's a reaction to, instead of having fixed camera angles, where that is the tension. You don't know necessarily what's around the corner, even if Jill could see it because it's right in front of her, but the camera's not showing you. That's the replacement for the tension created by fixed camera angles. The flashlight feature is there to make it still disorienting, and you don't know what is there, and sometimes things can even like go right under where you're looking with the flashlight.
Yeah,
and it's there to build tension,
which is, I think, like an innovation that came with like that game Dead Space. I think was big on that. Alan Wake, this is a big part of it. I
mean, even way back in like Half-Life, like they
it's cool to just see these things integrate into like, okay, we're understanding how to better build the genre for the modern gamer. I think that was all I was going to say. Yeah, it was about like, other than that, like the tank control situation does not bother me. I'm thinking about it just like in comparison to the action button review of Boku no Natsuyasumi, which is a video game where it's a game where you're like just a boy on summer vacation, and it does tank controls with the static backgrounds,
the pre-rendered backgrounds.
Yeah, the pre-rendered backgrounds. And the difference is you don't have this tension where you're saying it's a feature. I said from my experience it was a bug, because in that it's like you're not going to go to the next screen and all of a sudden something's going to jump out and kill you because it's a game about a boy on summer vacation.
Yeah.
I only make that comparison. It's like a very lengthy review of that game, and it spends a lot of time talking about Resident Evil versus that game.
Sure.
Because of the tank controls and them coming out around the same time. But beyond that, I'm like, yes, the tank controls, the static pre-rendered backgrounds, I think are a great sort of way to establish the atmosphere.
Yeah. And the pre-rendered backgrounds are there out of necessity. They could not dedicate enough computer talk, whatever, blah, blah, to having 3D, like actual, like engine built, like graphics for the environment. Like it would have been too big for the humble PlayStation in 1996. They couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And they realized, hey, like we can get ultra detailed stuff, and like it adds such a patina to the game, but it actually is just a space saving implementation. And they stopped doing that pretty much right after this game came out. They stopped doing pre-rendered backgrounds, and they then started doing in engine or whatever 3D.
Wait, the original Resident Evil 2 isn't the same model of like just a static like camera angle?
The original Resident Evil 2 is just, think of this except way more primitive, with PlayStation 1 graphics.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the question?
Like if because I'm only playing the Resident Evil 2 remake, where it's all modern 3D,
gorgeous
open space, not loading into static pre-rendered backgrounds. But the original one did have the pre-rendered backgrounds, right? Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Just making sure I was clear on that, I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. Resident Evil stuck with pre-rendered backgrounds up until 2002, and then after that, when Resident Evil 4 came out, that's when they went all 3D. And Resident Evil 4 in 2004 was a huge deal for the series, because they were listening to the complaints that gamers like you have about the limitations of traditional survival horror. I should also say, in the same sentence that we talk about Resident Evil, we could also be talking about Silent Hill as a very similar, it was just Konami's response to Resident Evil. They're like, oh, people like giving money for these things? We'll do that too. But the flashlight specifically was a feature of Silent Hill that was just perfectly implemented, where it was so scary because it's foggy and you've got this little dinky flashlight that barely lights things, and then this like and then like a zombie baby with like a knife arm comes running at you out of the dark.
Yeah. I want to talk sort of back to gameplay and almost maybe more a question, sort of, because I'm watching my footage where is this Barry?
That's Barry.
Okay,
Barry Burton, 38 years old, member of Stars.
I'm playing as Jill, and Barry gives you the lockpick.
Yep.
And I believe he tells you like investigate that wing. And me, modern gamer, who
I'm gonna go everywhere else,
who loves my goddarn yellow paint, like I'm sorry, I like knowing where I'm going. I don't like being lost. I was endlessly frustrated from this moment onward. Like the I like compared it a little bit to like the original Zelda, and now I already talked about I just played like Shadow of the Erdtree. And then I think this has very much like the same progression model where it's like poke at every tile in the world until you find the one that moves you forward. Absolutely. Is what it feels like. And I hate that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to Metroid, this is if Resident Evil was released on the Super Nintendo, it would have been a Metroid game.
Yeah, and it's like I loved it in the original Zelda because I was 5 or 6 years old, and that's the only thing I had, and it was magic.
Yes.
And then I hated it in Elden Ring because I'm like, it's 2024. Please give me some sort of signpost of where to go.
Yeah.
And like the amount, like I think in that game I spent 3 or 4 hours just like back and forth between guides and like going and picking up little items that prepared me for the final boss.
Yeah.
After like getting decimated by him 100 times. And this felt like somewhere in the middle, where I talked to Barry in that front room of the mansion where he's like, go investigate that area. I was like, oh, this must be where the next point of progression is.
Nope.
Because it's the 90s. We're getting modern-ish. No, there's a map here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe you could, this is where maybe the question is, I think, are you supposed to just really be relying a lot on the map and like, oh, this is a point I have progressed, that's one I haven't, and I should poke around there? I don't know. I didn't know how to progress through the game.
I think you put it really well, where survival horror is often a process of elimination, where you have to, it's like playing Clue, where you find the room and then you see, what does this room offer me? What does this room require of me? And it's really just a matter of like filling in like, okay, well, this door is locked. That means there must be another door unlocked somewhere that could lead me to find a key for this locked door.
Yeah.
And it's just then, oh yeah, also I should probably get around this zombie. And like, if you're playing, I think I gave you this tip before you started playing Resident Evil 2 Remake, but like, enemies are obstacles more than their opponents. They're there to test your ability to act on the fly and to like turn on a heel and to spin on a dime and to, like. Yeah.
That like hand-eye coordination action response of a
what Capcom,
like shoot 'em up or
Capcom
whatever.
Loves
first-person shooter.
Capcom loves intricate input to do simple things for video games.
Yeah.
Thinking specifically back on our talk about Street Fighter 2.
I mean, Mega Man.
Mega Man. I mean, yeah, sure. Mega Man is not, there's no exploration of Mega Man though. It is, that's a straight up platformer. Very different game.
But the platforming is tight and complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, I see that. Anyway.
Okay. So when you're exploring the mansion, and an enemy is sure to, get its hands on you at some point, Resident Evil Remake introduced the defense weapons, which is a unique function that I think, it's still implemented to this day. Like in the Resident Evil 2 Remake, if you equip a knife and a zombie attacks you from the front, you can use that knife to ward them off and to not incur damage in that instance. And this is the first time they've ever done that in Resident Evil Remake. And the defense weapons that Jill can get are a dagger or a taser. And they work just like, for some reason, she can only use a dagger once and then it's broken or gone. And it's just another way to like, it's it's doing you a favor. It's saying like, yeah, we realize this game's really hard and that the zombies might be a bit unfair if you don't see them until they're right on you.
Yeah.
But that it's a nice little what's the word I'm looking for? It helps accommodate gamers who aren't just trying to speed run this with perfect input. Because like if you watch a speed run of a Resident Evil game, and this might get more toward like my thesis on why Resident Evil is so important and like replayable, is because when you play this game, you are watching a movie unfold. Like, because like this is just so many like cheesy B movies mashed in together. And when you do it successfully, have you ever been in a play like as an actor? I know you've done, you know, stage stuff, but like have you ever like had to memorize like pages and pages of notes and like set?
I was
like,
one of the leads in Pippin in high school.
Nice. So you understand the satisfaction of a good show.
Well, I was a high schooler. So,
well, you know,
so I wasn't really that good, but
but you know what I mean. You you didn't forget your lines and you didn't miss your cues.
It is terrifying.
It's terrifying.
As somebody who, I mean, I was a live musician for like 10 years, and the first 5 to 7 years of that was always terrifying until it just clicks. You know, I didn't stick with like scripted theater long enough to hit that
being
moment.
In a band is a great, alternative where things went according to plan.
Yeah.
And Resident Evil games are they're there for you to feel like you've successfully starred in a cheesy horror film where you can like I could recite every freaking line in this game, and like it's really a matter of like, oh, I hit all my cues, I memorized my lines, I didn't miss any of the marks, and like the it's choreography where it's like I know that I need to go, and then I first need to get the jade arrow, and I put the jade arrow into the slot, and then I get the book, and that gives me one of the keys, and I use that key to go to the corridor. I get the shotgun, etc., etc.
I'm just giggling because in contrast to that, we have the footage of my first time in this room where you get the first floor map.
I have never spent this much time in that room.
And I'm having a miserable time figuring out, like, there's a dresser you have to push from behind towards the camera to line up with the statue you pull this shiny map out of.
Yep.
And I'm having a heck of a time. And it's like, nobody's going to watch that movie, right?
Well, that's called dress rehearsal.
Yeah. And it's contributing to me, like, not having a good time with it. And like the thing I was struggling with was like, okay, I can push this around. Clearly they want me to get it up to this statue.
Yep.
And I couldn't find like what angle, how do I get to the right angle to push this? And that's like something that's like, you're not even going to really find that by digging through a guide, you know? Like,
well, okay.
That was just like too much friction for me.
Resident Evil is a puzzle game as well as a survival horror game. And the puzzles in it, especially in the early titles, are very, very tedious.
Yeah. No,
but they are also inspired by Mensa, the place that like people, if people want to, if people think they're geniuses, they give money to Mensa to tell them, sure, buddy. And the tests that Mensa offers are usually like, you think of like, you put the blocks in front of the kid and you're like, oh, assemble these blocks into this shape. And like, if the kid's a genius, he just, does it. And then he goes on a road trip to California, to whatever. But be sure to listen to our episode on The Wizard. It did not get as many views as I hoped for.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Who cares? I'm having a good time.
So the series has also learned from these little tests that, like, yes, people like being challenged intellectually. Ugh, I hate saying it like that.
Yeah.
Intellectually, people love being intellectually challenged. They like a test of the wits.
Yeah.
And they don't like it when it sucks. When you have to watch a character.
By the way, we're still watching me in this room as this conversation goes on.
This is fucking miserable, dude.
Which again is like, this doesn't, like, I understand. I solved the puzzle mentally. I'm fighting the mechanics.
The mechanics, yeah. And you'll know by playing through the most modern one that you were playing, Resident Evil 2 Remake 2019.
Those puzzles felt good.
Those puzzles feel good because
I felt like I was playing a Zelda game.
Because it's not the game's fault if you're not doing it right. It is all on you. They're all logic based. They are like, you remember the portable safe where you had to like put the keys in?
Yeah, I loved that.
In the thing.
Yeah.
I literally mapped it out so that I could just do it in one go. Like, I pressed A1 and that correlated to the fourth light. And so I was able to do it like that, just analytically quick. I didn't want to just do the Simon Says punching around trying to figure it out because I'm not good at that. But Resident Evil takes all these puzzles and they make them prerequisites to get key items that allow you to proceed through the map. And as you go through, your character discovers just a little bit more about why things went wrong. And you'll also find survivors from the Bravo team. If you're playing as Jill, let's see. You don't meet any Bravos until right before the snake. Enrico.
Yeah, I think you were able to save that guy and I let him die.
What is his name? Richard?
I forget. My experience with that guy was I ran into him. He's like, I need the antidote. And I went and I got the antidote from my perspective as fast as I could.
Sure.
And came right back to him and he's like, oh no, I'm dying. And I'm dead. Or something like that happened. I was like, what did I do wrong here?
If you survived a little bit longer into the snake fight, he would actually come in halfway through and give assistance. And then he gets eaten by the snake. Spoiler alert.
Is it possible for him to die early? Because my memory was he just died.
Well, if I'm remembering this cinematics correctly, like he's like, I need serum. You go to the other side of the mansion and you get serum from one of the safe rooms. And then you bring it back to him and he's just like, oh, like take my walkie-talkie. I'm dying.
Yeah.
And
I'm scrubbing footage and I think it's on another video. So we won't worry
okay.
about finding the exact answer.
We're not going to do the typical Camp Video Games like rundown of the full story. I'm just giving like a very abridged overview of like what happens in the game. And, when you're fighting the snake, you're finding one of the key items that'll allow you to progress to the next section, which is what I wanted to talk about because this is an actual important prerequisite before we watch the film. Is there's a mutant girl named Lisa Trevor who is an indestructible stalker enemy that follows you around a map. Not the entire map, but just these little areas. Like, and her hands are like bound together. She looks like if anything, she looks like she was taken straight out of Silent Hill. And where Silent Hill is not a zombie game, it is a survival horror game that really focuses on like psychological fear and like just like the monsters, quote unquote, are mostly just like anthropomorphized like demon looking things. And Lisa Trevor just looks like a horrible mutant monster girl. And she has a huge backstory that is completely original for the remake. It was all added because 1996 was kind of a bare bones, like, okay, we got this monster, we got these zombie dogs are chasing us into the mansion and zombie people are attacking us. And then there's sometimes, what other monsters did you see in this playthrough? Did you see spiders at that point?
I saw the snake, of course. I saw
fun fact, the snake is named Yawn.
Oh yeah, I did. I was using guide, so I got the snake's weird name. Whatever it is that the zombies can come back as if you kill them and don't burn them. Sean got so excited he choked. Which is an appreciable, I think, mechanic to the survival genre where like, I can protect myself in the future if I burn this body once you've like done it once. And then you're limited on the resources to be able to do that. Is clever, but the fact that like I had to go back to my little save room to refill the kerosene, like every time I did it, was just like, you know?
What? Okay, so they're called Crimson Heads, and this is the best part of the remake for me. It creates so much tension because unless you decapitate a zombie with a magnum or the shotgun, they have a chance. Well, they're like, then there's a ticking clock onto when they will resurrect as Crimson Heads, which are just way more aggressive, quicker, deadlier zombies. And I adore this addition to the game because I like being stressed in video games.
Wait,
I like
is this
being
in
challenged.
addition to the remake?
Yes, this is completely new.
Okay.
This is not a part of the original in any other, and you don't see this happen in any other Resident Evils, which I think is fascinating because I adore this decision. Because what it does is it tells you, yes, you can shoot a zombie with your handgun or stab a zombie with your knife, and it'll go down, and it'll not be a threat for a while. And if you feel like you need to kill this zombie and it's your only option, then like by all means do it. But it's just going to set you up later for a much more difficult fight.
Yeah. I mean, I liked that element. Implementation, like I said, not so much, but the idea felt like, oh, this is something I haven't really run into much that I can recall.
Yeah.
I think
it's unique to this game.
Yeah.
And it's something that like it just adds that much more realism to the zombie like crisis.
Because you know how when there's a zombie crisis and you kill it and then it come back 6 hours later, don't y'all be hating that when it happens?
How many of y'all like sex?
It's like, but I think that speaks to like how fresh it is. I've never seen we talked about, we both have a lot of experience with the zombie genre. My experience has always been like headshot, it's done.
Yes. Yes.
And now not so much.
Nope. So what are other innovations, I'll say?
Oh, I want to talk about I did like I don't know where I have any good footage, but I just saw it was like on screen is the examine of items where you can
the 3D examination.
You can flip and rotate them, and that's how you can discover either clues or how things combine to form like a piece of the puzzle or a key, or I don't know if there's like lore hidden in things, but
of course.
That was another thing that I was like, oh, okay. Ooh, that's fresh. That's cute. You know?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Resident Evil is a brilliant series. Like they have done so much to establish like what is now old hat, because it like I mean we've been old enough. What am I saying? We are old enough to have matured alongside video games as a medium where they started off very rudimentary when we were kids, and we've seen them like just develop and mature. And with Resident Evil, like they establish so many like standards like that are like essential to a lot of modern gaming like utility.
Yeah, well, I mean, this one is like that's a mechanic I have not really seen where like what it creates for me as the player is this sense of I am the character rotating an object around, examining it in my hands.
Yeah.
I don't know of another example of something that I can think of quite like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can't think of other games that do that off the top of my head.
Yeah, that allows me to do that granular of an examination of an item and in a necessary way. It's like, again, it wasn't implemented smoothly enough for me to enjoy it as much as I could have, but I was like, ooh, I like that it's there.
Yeah, and I think if you ever feel the need to like absolutely scare the shit out of yourself, play Resident Evil 7, and that one uses that function of like examining items to such a sophisticated level that it is like it's its own game in some ways, where it's just it's brilliant. Like, man, did I mention I really like Resident Evil?
I think so. I don't know.
Okay, so one of the things that Resident Evil Remake 2002 introduced, alongside with the Crimson Head zombies, those are the aggressive red guys that come back, is the shotgun does not guarantee a decapitation of the zombie, which is still true to this day in Resident Evil games. Like, it's not a guaranteed one-hit kill on zombies.
Is it like a dice roll thing?
Yes,
because I was like, I can't aim. I know that.
I'm so glad you mentioned dice roll too, because there's also a chance, and it's randomly generated in terms of when it'll happen. But you could get critical shots with your pistol that will one-hit decapitate zombies as well. And the way that I understand it works is that at the beginning of the game, it'll decide let's say every 17 shots is going to be a critical shot. And the next time you play, it could be every 23 shots or something like that. But it's balanced enough that it's not gonna say like every 2 shots is gonna be a killer, but like it introduces this complete randomness to the game, which is there for the benefit of people who replay this game on like constant repeats, where it's like, for me, I replay Resident Evil games because I've memorized my lines, I know my cues, and I can just smoothly run through it. And it's like, it's just a smooth thing.
I want to put this show on for myself.
I'm in control. I mean, like, really, as a person who is very scared of, like, you know, monsters and things, like the idea of them is very
They're
scary.
not real. It's okay.
No,
you
they
can go
are.
to bed at night.
They are. They are absolutely real. They're called Republicans.
I was going to say they're called MAGA guys. MAGA
No, but
chuds.
it's, for me, it's an empowerment. It is like, I have conquered my fear, and now I'm the master of this like crisis.
Yeah.
And I think it's benefited me in my actual life because I've never been attacked by a zombie.
I mean, scoreboard.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a dub. Okay.
I want to talk about another little game mechanic of the examinable world.
Yep.
Like that there's things don't like shine and say like look at me like certain objects do, but there's a lot of things that you can with the whatever the action button is. I don't remember. I was playing on Switch. I think it was like the A button.
Oh, let's talk about we'll get to that with Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, I like this idea where like you can press the action button. It's like it gives you more detail about what the character's looking at.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a ton of experience with the genre before what we had before Resident Evil, but there was like this one game we had called Last Half of Darkness.
Ooh, never played that.
That it was like a first person, again, all pre-rendered, like we're talking like 8-bit, like sub 8-bit pixel graphics. And we were
what year?
Terrified of it as kids. Like I think 91.
What platform were you playing this on? Computer?
Oh, it was a DOS game.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And it's like this, where you're just going through a house and like trying to, and that, I don't know if it's just because I was a dumb kid. It felt more like brute force guessing when I run into a monster or like, I remember we were terrified of these like twin girls, and it was like this, where it's like you go and it describes what you're seeing, and then you choose how to interact. It feels like holding over a detail of like that era of like adventure and survival horror game, to like lush out the world a little bit with the text.
Yeah.
I don't remember how often it was like critical in this game.
It's often not critical.
Yeah.
But it does add so much depth to the game. And it's also, it's showing, I think you put it this way, where it's like, it's showing you how the character is viewing things around them, which I think is fascinating because it's going to be different for Jill as it is for Chris in terms of how they react to certain things or like, you know, what their opinions are. And it's not groundbreaking, but it is just a nice touch.
Well, it's not. It's like it's a holdover from before we even had graphics in games. I never played Zork or whatever, but it's like that's an entirely text-based like role-playing adventure.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just like a welcome holdover, I think, from that era that fills the world out a little more.
I feel like if we were like a bad podcast, we would be like reading from Wikipedia right now. And like one of the first things that would have been mentioned for Resident Evil is that it was originally designed to be a remake of the Famicom game called Sweet Home, which is a horror game about a group of what's the word I'm looking for? Paranormal investigators searching through a haunted mansion. And it was a Capcom game, and it was a role-playing game, actually, and there's now, it was a Japan exclusive, but there's been a translation that you can get through certain means that is absolutely worth playing. And I would actually recommend it because it was based on a movie of the same title, a Japanese made-for-TV movie called Sweet Home. And I fell asleep watching it the other night. And from what I was awake for, I really enjoyed it. It's very, very campy.
It's funny. I'm trying to scan the Wikipedia article right now, to see if it's mentioned. But I don't know how to do a Command F on an iPad, which is where my web browser.
Oh,
is
sure,
up.
sure. Yeah, it would probably be in the development like blurb. They would say something.
But
about
I'll
it.
take your word for it. It's probably in there somewhere.
And I wanted to watch Sweet Home for camp video games, but it's so removed from what we're actually doing here that it's just like, probably not. But it's free on YouTube, guys. If you want to watch it, it's great. Well, it's fine. I fell asleep to it, but I fall asleep all the time. You know what? I
almost do it every night.
I was about to do that. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, it's in there. It's in the development section.
Yeah,
I found
of course
it.
it is.
All right.
Sweet Home was a very fun game though, and it's just like it's like a Dragon Quest kind of clone game, except when you go into combat, it goes into a first person point of view, which is very cool. And man, there's just so much Resident Evil. Like I didn't send you this photo because I was actually embarrassed when I took a photo of all of my Resident Evil media that I own. It like took up a lot of space.
Just filled up in a whole room in your house.
Kind of. Like I don't even collect like figures or anything like that, like on the regular, but like it's just the amount of discs and cartridges and books that I have Resident Evil related. It's man, you're going the wrong way with that.
Yeah,
if you're watching the footage on YouTube,
I'll put the footage up for a second.
I'm heavily judging Josh's gameplay right now, but it's my fault. I should have been there for you, buddy.
If it was 1996 and this was all I had for 4 or 5 months at a time, I might have been having a blast pushing this stupid statue around.
I know what you mean.
I'm up on the second floor. I eventually figured out there's this statue of a woman. You push it off and it goes down in the dining room, and you get
a blue diamond,
which I had no idea what to do with. But anyway.
I put the blue diamond to the tiger's eye, the lion's eyeball socket, and that gives you a shotgun shells, and then you put the yellow one in, and that gives you one of the crests.
Which, again, I'll talk about this more maybe with the RE2 remake, that I don't know how much of this was the original game versus the remake, that the puzzles they felt a lot more intuitive, which is why I keep going back to this feels very prototypey.
Yeah.
The puzzles in that, the items I was receiving clicked in my head where and how I was supposed to use them 1,000 times better than they did in this game.
Yes. The modern Resident Evil games are really good at telegraphing what is intended of the player, like what's expected of the player. You said earlier, I love yellow paint. And
give me my yellow paint. Slop it everywhere. I don't care.
Resident Evil 2 uses a lot of yellow paint.
The original or the remake?
No, the remake that you've been playing.
Yeah.
You maybe haven't even noticed it, but like there's so much yellow paint.
I've definitely noticed it, and I very much appreciate it. And the fact that it's not literal yellow paint. We'll talk about it more in that episode. So I don't want to go too far ahead. One thing I do want to loop back and give you the opportunity to speak on. I wanted to talk about it when you were talking about this idea of running these games as like perfecting a stage play for yourself, is that a big innovation of it is the dual, like, not, I guess, character / story playthroughs.
Yeah.
Is that it's like 2 plays that canonically are kind of going on at the same time, and you can master them separately and then put them together in your head later, is another thing that, even though I did not play the Chris run, I could still understand and appreciate the idea of what it is and what it's like innovating in gaming.
So this is kind of, this is something that Resident Evil pioneered, which is, what's it called? I think it's
non-linear.
It's called the zapping system. Okay. And this originally happened in 1998's Resident Evil 2, where you play as either Leon or Claire. Fun fact, Claire Redfield is the little sister of Chris Redfield, the male protagonist of the first game. And the zapping system in Resident Evil 2, and I'll try not to take too much time on this, but like all it really does is it gives the player a chance to establish continuity between your first game and your second game, where and this is still somewhat prevalent in the remake of Resident Evil 2, but the actions of Claire if you're playing Claire's A scenario, because every character in the sequel. So I should probably save this for the Resident Evil 2 talk.
Yeah.
But in terms of what Resident Evil 1 is, they're separate but equal. Where
It's like you're learning
neither
different
one,
lines for the same play.
there's not neither of them is fully canonical.
Mm-hmm.
They but if you were to smash them together and then make some directorial decisions, it's all one story. Where as you play through Resident Evil 1, the remake or the first game in general, 1996 or 2002. There, I'll be specific. If you're playing through Resident Evil, your character eventually, once you get into the underground laboratory, which is like there's the mansion, there's the guardhouse, there is the sewers, and there's the laboratory. So there's 4 main maps for you to explore in Resident Evil. And Resident Evil Remake adds a 5th with you go outside and you experience Lisa Trevor, the monster girl.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to the laboratory, if you're playing as Jill, you'll find that Chris has been imprisoned, and you need to collect these items called MO disc. I guess that stands for modus operandus. I don't know. They're called MO discs, and they unlock the prison where your partner's being held. And so in each playthrough, one of them is in the prison, so you can't be like, oh well, which one actually happened? Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, in the novelization, they skip that part because they just treat all the characters as like the novelization is from the perspective of pretty much all of the characters, even the villains, which I really love when you see stuff through the villain's eyes, because I'm a bad person.
Yeah, what the evolution looks like for me, what's just coming to mind is like Mario 2, the original Mario 2 reskin of this Japanese game, Doki Doki Panic. Right. You have 4 characters that all play mechanically different.
Yes.
And this is like that.
Yes.
But there's also a bit of like story shift that you get that encourages replayability.
Absolutely. When you're playing as Jill, you're going to interact with Barry and with Albert Wesker as the 2 main like other characters that you're interacting with. When you're playing as Chris, you're going to interact with Wesker and Rebecca Chambers, who is a Bravo that you find that's been like, she's one of the few survivors of the helicopter crash and of the monsters everywhere. And Rebecca Chambers she's the character you did not experience at all in your gameplay, but she turns into a very important character. She gets her own standalone title, which is Resident Evil 0, which is technically a prequel to the first game. There was a very funny thing that happened in, I think it was 2002, where Capcom made this big announcement. They're like, okay, from now on, we are only releasing Resident Evil on Nintendo, which was a huge fuck you to play Sony for some, like, I don't know what the bad blood might have been, but like,
it's a very fascinating inversion of the Squaresoft decision.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We probably had this similar talk about Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. I didn't know any companies had done that the other way around, just because I think people saw the writing on the wall of the limitation of like, people want CGI cutscenes. They take up space. We need CD-ROMs for that. We don't care that the N64 can process the actual in-game 3D better than the PlayStation.
Yes. One of the reasons that they originally, Resident Evil 2 1998 got a port to the N64. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that they wanted to use Nintendo was because they wouldn't have to do the door loading screens anymore.
Nah.
Because if it's on a cartridge, then you don't need that like loading time.
Yeah.
Which, man, they really missed the mark on that one, because the Resident Evil 2 remake still has unskippable doors, which is baffling and maddening, but it's fine. In later releases of Resident Evil 1 1996, specifically from my knowledge, the Nintendo DS release that came out, I believe in 2006, which is called Resident Evil DS. Deadly Science.
Off the nose.
Not dual screen.
Oh.
But you can skip the doors in that one, and it's amazing because it cuts a lot of time out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to beat Resident Evil 1 something like 56 minutes.
Wow.
without by just skipping the doors, it was that much quick. And I was using an infinite rocket launcher. So
yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. Like, if I knew what I was doing and I have to wait for these goddamn doors, it's not a long game.
Yeah.
And which speaks again, I love your analogy of it being like perfecting going on stage and doing a play. Is like it becomes the length of about a play or a movie if you do it beat for beat correctly.
Yes.
And that makes me understand like why it caters to like a speedrunning community.
Absolutely. And the speedrunning community for Resident Evil is incredibly like broad. There's a lot, and and there's all the different types of challenges that go with speedrunning as well, where you can do a pacifist run to some degree, or at least you can do a run where you incur no damage, or you only use the knife, which is I've never done that. That is a lot of work. And there's a lot of different ones that you can do, and it's fun. It's fun to watch the speed runs for me because of the way my brain is shaped, and it's Resident Evil it's my favorite movie in some ways, where it's, well, if you were to ask Sean, what's your favorite movie? It's actually Dawn of the Dead. Like I am way in on the zombie stuff, and I understand exactly what you mean with the oversaturation. I'm just getting sick of it. I don't pay attention to most modern zombie stuff at this point.
Yeah, like even The Last of Us, where people are like, no, it's the peak of the genre. It's just like, I couldn't get into it.
I've been saving it.
I haven't played 5 or so hours.
I haven't played or seen the series, but that's obviously camp video games material.
Oh yeah. And like, I don't know, like Last of Us Fever was 2019, 2020. Whenever The Last of Us 2 came out, I was like, I don't want to engage in anything that dark right now while I'm holed up in my house for 2 years straight. Yeah. So I just kind of missed the boat. But I had played the first remaster of it a little bit, and I did feel that sense where I'm like, I get it. This is probably better than where things went with the oversaturation with Walking Dead, etc. But like, I'm just too burnt out. I don't want to do it.
When the game, I'm just gonna try to break down the different enemies that are in the game, because Resident Evil is like, it's the monster mash. We've got zombies, we've got zombie dogs. There are zombie.
The game opens with shooting dogs.
I know.
Just like Tomb Raider.
If we were playing by our Tomb Raider protocol, we would have to turn the game off before we even start playing.
Like, Sean, can you please pick one game that doesn't start with me murdering a dog?
I'll see what I can do. Best I can do is murder a cat. Okay.
Anyway, go on.
Zombie crows are a fun little like threat, because like okay. Did you watch the Lucio Fulci zombie movies? He did Lucio Fulci is an Italian filmmaker who was making stuff. He made an unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead. In Italy, Dawn of the Dead was released as Zombie, just without an E at the end. I love it. I love how it looks without the E. Zombi. And George Romero, obviously of Italian descent, and he has good connections with Italian filmmakers. I think a lot of money came from Italy in making the original Dawn of the Dead. Lucio Fulci then just like kind of outside of, if my understanding of this is correct, like outside of like George Romero's like knowledge, he's just like, hey, Zombie 2, and it's a completely different thing. And it's a great movie. And also, gang, YouTube, free. Watch it. It's fun. It's really good. This is the movie where a guy in a scuba suit fights a zombie shark for some reason. It's great. And there's also a really, really shocking eye impalement scene. The reason I bring up Lucio Fulci's Zombie is because I believe it was Zombie 3 or 4. I think it's Zombie 3. There are zombie crows in it. And that's just the little. I'm trying to flex my genre muscles right now. Of just like showing like these all have precedent. They're not making most of this up.
Well, I want to use this opportunity to make one more pitch to you for Alan Wake. Is that about 3/4 of the way through Alan Wake 2, you're leaving this movie theater stage that you just finished, and on the screen starts playing a Finnish B horror film that is 20 minutes long, that has like critical story lore that you can either choose to watch and stay in the theater, or you can just leave and miss it.
Give me some popcorn, baby. I'm sitting down and watching the entire thing.
Man, that game is out of control. But anyway, we got
Is there an anime based on Alan Wake?
there'll be an adaptation eventually.
Oh.
I think there's a TV series in the works.
While it's on my mind, there are so many adaptations of Resident Evil at this point. We're not even talking about the Mia Jovovich movies, because those are, until they got to the third one, those are completely separate from the games. But current day, there are some like pretty good like short films and miniseries. Not the Netflix exclusive one. That was garbage. The one that's just called Resident Evil. That's whatever. But there's a lot of good Resident Evil stuff out there if you want to not only play it, but also watch it.
Back to the monsters and the zombie crows. I remember there being a room where crows were hawking at me, but they didn't attack me. Do you have to provoke them?
Okay, so that is one of the where you are opening a corridor that kind of gives you a quick through way from the eastern wing of the building to the central room. And what you're doing in that game, because this is a great puzzle in its own way. There's a master painting of a queen or goddess wearing a crown of a particular color, a necklace of a particular color, and a bracelet of a particular color. And it's your job to figure out that if you look at all of the other paintings in the room, there is, each of the, they're all portraits of people wearing one of those things, except you have to flip a light that changes the color because one side of the room has red lights that'll affect the color. So you need to understand color theory. And the other side of the room has blue lights. So if, let's say, the goddess is wearing an orange crown, a purple necklace, and a green bracelet. And if you find somebody that's wearing a yellow crown on the red side, if you flip the light, you know that it'll turn orange. And the purple, it's all.
I missed all of this. We do not have footage of this because I'm an idiot.
Yeah. It's a logic puzzle. Like I love logic puzzles because there's always an answer. It's I feel like I really like related to like Mr. Spock when I was a kid, just because I was like, it has to be logical. Like if it's not logical, then I'm not paying attention. Although that is my entire sense of humor is based on absurdity and nonsense. So I don't know. I'm complicated too, man.
Yeah. But
zombie crows, we've got the big giant snake named Yawn, and you encountered him in the first boss fight with Yawn. There are 2 boss fights with Yawn.
Yeah.
And
it did not feel like a fight. It felt like me running around getting bit and not understanding what to do. I tried it 2 or 3 times, and that was the wall for me. Yep. That's where I was like, I'm good. I'm gonna let Sean fill in the blanks from here.
Yeah, that's okay. Because I you know what? I respect your time, Josh. And if Camp Video Games had a host other than Junior Counselor Sean, who absolutely adores all aspects of Resident Evil, like I would be playing through every single one of these and doing it in depth. And maybe I'll just be doing that on my own too.
Yeah.
But we've got you didn't encounter them, but they're like amphibian looking, well, they're like lizard looking gorilla monsters called hunters, and they can one hit kill you by decapitating you with their claws. They're very scary, and they come in at about the halfway point of the game, and they really up, like they're like Crimson Head zombies except with insta kill ability, and they are bullet sponges. We've got there's normal size snakes too. That'll just like, they're more of an obstacle. Again, most of these enemies are not opponents. They are obstacles. That's the real way to play a Resident Evil game. Like guns are a last resort. We've got zombie sharks. Speaking of Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2, there are zombie sharks in Resident Evil. There's a monster called a chimera, and it's kind of like, oh boy, okay. Resident Evil borrows so much that you can have a direct link to, like, they're ripping off Kafka, they're ripping off David Cronenberg, they're ripping off John Carpenter, they're ripping off, paying homage, kind of the same thing, right? All great art is stolen. But we've got the final boss of the game is called the Tyrant. Oh, there's zombie spiders too that are the size of like rhinoceros. But the tyrant is the end game boss, and it is a humanoid that stands at like 9 feet tall, and he's got one gigantic claw arm and an exposed heart. You've been playing 2, so have you fought Birkin at any point so far? I'm big not, weird guy.
I'm not connecting very deeply with the characters in this series.
Birkin is what his name was before, but
I did fight a thing that sounds like what you just described.
Yeah, except he's got a big eyeball on his arm,
or in a somewhere. Yeah.
Oh wait, are you talking about the stalker monster that the guy that like throws the helicopter out of the wall when he starts following you? He's following you through the entire thing.
It was a mutant thing after I left the police station.
Okay, yeah. That was William Birkin. It's actually everything that's happening here. It's his fault.
Well,
he's the scientist.
I shot him dead.
He's not dead.
God dang it! I mean, I lit him on fire. Does that
fire? With Resident Evil, like with the monsters, I'm so happy to see this with my nephew, who is like. He is so into monsters. He's also very easily spooked. Like, he watches the wrong, like, Scooby-Doo, and he's going to have trouble going to bed sometimes. But, like, he is obsessed with monsters. And I'm like, okay, it's not just me. Maybe it's just in the blood. I don't know. But these monsters are something that, like, I would equate this to like how people felt the first time they read like The Lord of the Rings or any sort of fantasy that is like, it's surface level stuff, but you can really read into it, where like Lord of the Rings is pretty, straightforward story in the sense that like, take the ring, go destroy it. Good job. It's about the monsters that you killed on the way. They're unique.
I would contrast that to my experience with Lord of the Rings. It's about the friends we make along the way.
I hate them. Let's kill some orcs.
I'm just saying, reiterating, that's maybe the difference between the two of us and how we approach these things.
Yeah. Why you have way more friends than I do. But the monsters are a real threat to the player. When you play these, like you see a zombie, even a simple zombie is like a true threat. It can actually end your game, therefore ruining your night. Yeah,
which is both a testament and a critique of the tank controls, right? Is like sometimes you're fighting them in a way that for me, I don't remember. Is there you could choose a difficulty setting at the beginning of this remake.
This version. In other games, there are no difficulty versions.
I believe I went with the easiest and maybe died on a simple one zombie like staged encounter once or twice.
I mean, that's just learning to play the game.
Yeah.
I think I think a lot of the reason a lot of people don't like Resident Evil is because it's not inherently easy. And there's no like they do give you some like tutorials in the sense of like you pick up a defense weapon and then they'll give you a little blurb. This is what this does. You need to equip it. You can decide whether or not it happens automatically or other stuff. But like Resident Evil just kind of like throws you in a pool of piranhas and says sink or swim.
Yeah. I'm sorry. This is like bringing something up for me that's sort of clicking with me about games and why I do or don't enjoy them. Is like I've seen, I don't know, there's like a lot of discourse. I'm thinking especially back to like Shadow of the Air Tree, just came out a few months ago. I finished it finally. And there's like, especially that game, there's like the quote unquote get good discourse where people take this pride in being good at like a difficult video game.
Oh, sure.
And I'm sorry, I just don't resonate with that at all. Like I'm proud of other things in my life.
Yeah.
I play video games to escape and like experience a story, and like I got through and got good at that. Not because I wanted. I mean, there is an element of like overcoming the challenge, but it's not like something I'm going to go online and brag about. Of like, I beat Radon, I beat Consort Radon, aren't I? Oh, I'm such a good gamer. You know, like that's not something that's important to me in life. And I honestly think if it is the most important thing in your life, it's a little sad.
There's a lot of people who don't have much else going on.
Yeah.
And that's like,
and if you don't, I don't want to like knock that, but I encourage you to try. You know,
I encourage you to start a podcast. Think about our talk about the Nintendo World Championship NES edition. go back and listen to that if you haven't already.
Yeah, and like that's something that's like it's sort of a fun flow statey thing for me, but it's not like my thing that I'm proud about in my life,
Sure,
you know.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Reddit sucks.
And this game, it could maybe it's like something about it that is that level of difficulty for me. That goes back to that like bottom line kind of point of like I didn't feel my time was respected because I'm not interested in it the way that it connects with you of like, ooh, I can continually master this until I can experience it as a movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I want to experience it as a movie the first time.
Sure. I would say that the Resident Evil 2 remake is a very good approximation of that.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying it immensely more for that reason.
I'm so excited to talk with you about that next time because that is a masterpiece in this series. Like the series it's been
very well done.
They have been releasing Resident Evil games pretty consistently, either mainline or side stories, like since 1996. We are approaching year 30 of Resident Evil. Quicker than I'd like to say. And what that means is that like there is a lot of mulligans in the series, but there's also been some real refinement. And especially when we get to the next game's talk, the Resident Evil 2 remake, I think we're going to talk about like what this genre is actually capable of in modern parlance.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff I can talk about, like where it dialed in and fixed things since this also remake, but 20 years prior almost. So we were talking about monsters. I don't know if we hit all the monsters because, like I said, I didn't see them all.
Yeah, I think we hit them all. And the way that the monsters like play into the story. Ooh, okay. So the humanizing side of the zombies is a really important like meta narrative in Resident Evil, where you're finding that diary, you find this guy who's losing his humanity, and you realize like, oh, like that zombie I just killed, that was that guy. And like there's a tragic side to this that is like, sure, it is campy and silly, but there's like for the time, like that was like very like sobering to a degree, where it's like when I say I want to kill a zombie, like that really just means I'm willing to do that to survive. I'm willing to like take an undead life for my life.
Yeah.
And
I think in that situation, I'm the guy who just like finds the most or least painful way to just take myself out.
Sure.
Like, is there something I can take to just go quietly in my sleep?
Oh boy.
It's probably the way I'd go in a survivalist situation like this.
If you had stuck with the game a little bit longer, you would have found a man who hangs himself in one of the corridors. Like it's what's it called? It's like not the guest house or something like that, where like some of the scientists live in between, working in the labs or whatever. But a man hangs himself. You don't see him hang himself, but you see that he's hanged, and later he comes back as a zombie while hanged, and then like escapes the noose and goes for you. And it's just like, like it's you see it in Dawn of the Dead, like when like in one of the opening scenes of Dawn of the Dead, a cop blows his brains out. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'll give to the zombie genre that is both a interesting pro of it for some people, and then maybe also the reason why I'm a little like at arm's length with it at this point in my life is that it's like both reckoning with the end of mortality and the possibilities of what comes after, of like how much of my consciousness is there in a zombie if I come back as a zombie. Like, do I want to just end myself in a zombie situation is like a scary thought that like a character like that sort of like makes you face in a way that is, it's interesting storytelling, but as I get old and soft, I'm like, I don't know if I need that in my life.
Yeah, it's dark stuff.
I'm not an edgy teen anymore. You know?
Yeah. I have overexposed myself to this type of media where I now like I like connecting the dots and just seeing the inspiration behind these things more than I am like actually am like absorbing the story. I'm more just like, I know where they did that. Like I know where they got that from.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm like quote unquote triggered by anything that's going on in these games, especially like the 2 remake we're playing where it's like way more gruesome.
Oh boy.
I'm not like going, oh, I'm just like, oh, damn, yeah, that was gross. Hell yeah, dude. Yeah. Like I have to like have an arm's length like approach to these things. I don't know if that made sense, but
I'm here with you, buddy.
Yeah.
there's a lot of like small stories in Resident Evil that like shows you that okay, so it really all boils down to like the tragedy of Resident Evil is corporate greed.
Yeah.
And that this umbrella corporation has decided to use their immense wealth to research bioweapons and viral technology.
Yeah, I mean there is a real sense of maybe not zombies, but the way like we live in a world where there are entities like this that have this much power to cause this level of problem.
Yes, exactly. And Resident Evil is really about what the common person does in reaction to this like Lovecraftian terror that is also man-made. And it's so compelling to see how different people respond to it, because as you play through different titles in the game, I'm specifically thinking of the original 1999 or maybe 2000 Resident Evil 3. There's a character you meet who has just lost his daughter and his wife. They were eaten by zombies, and he's just like he like hides himself in a shipping container. He's just like, I'm not coming out. Like I'm just like he's like I'm staying here. And it's like through his inaction, you learn so much about him, where he's just like, I mean, his reason to live is gone now. His family's been killed in front of him, and he's just kind of like shutting down. And like that is such a normal human response to trauma, where you just get up, like the fight or flight or freeze. And that is so common. And Resident Evil does that in a humanizing way, and it's not like exploitative, and it's not preachy either. It is just happenstance. Like as a result of this corporate monster like ruining Raccoon City, and like basically like the Pandora's box has been opened, and now the world is going to have to deal with it just because they didn't pay a couple. It's like Jurassic Park. They didn't pay their IT guy enough.
Yeah.
Like that's what is the problem.
Look, man, I'm no fan of the government, but the FDA and the FTC, they're kind of important.
They're very important. And the EPA.
Yeah. And man, those guys, they're working real hard on dismantling them. So get out and vote.
Get out and vote for Tim Waltz.
I'm not excited about telling anybody to vote for anybody these days, but
I know I'm not. I am.
These things matter.
I am no one's cheerleader.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my wife about that. It's like we're recording this pre-election 2024.
I'm guessing this is around election time.
Yeah,
this will come out,
and we'll see. Yes. Josh, have we talked enough about Resident Evil for you to say I've talked enough about Resident Evil?
I have. I think that question is more important for you. I mean,
Josh, have I talked enough about Resident Evil? Because this is my life. I could just keep talking.
Right. I mean, I want to make sure, because I don't think you had to sell me necessarily on like, why is it a good game? I think I hope I've been able to show to any like true fans like, no, I get it, right? And put my perspective in a way that's not like saying it's a shitty game, because that kind of content bores me.
Yes.
You know. So I guess my question is there anything that helps understand the context of this game and history, and like we've talked a lot about its role in developing towards modern gaming that we've missed? That's the question left.
Resident Evil did something for the video gaming industry where it took a set of like pretty standard horror tropes and it packaged it and it made gaming more permittable for older audiences. And that is such an important step in the maturation of video games. And what it has really done for me personally, I think I've overstated what it means to me. Like how incredibly important this set of scenarios is. It and all the building blocks of like my personal life that lended themselves to accepting this type of media, where like I am going to gravitate toward anything in this like family of games just because it's won my loyalty. I am a cult member of, like it's a cult classic and I am a cultist.
I'm not even that level with like Final Fantasy. There's things I skip all over the place.
I mean, there are things that I skip with Resident Evil. I have played everything besides the Revelations series, which is a side story that uses some of the main characters, but it was released for the 3DS and it utilized 3D too much, and that gave me a migraine. But they've re-released it on the Switch.
Did you have a 3DS?
I did for a small time, and then I had to make rent.
Were there? Oh, okay. Because I was saying, like, isn't there like a dial to turn off the 3D?
Yeah.
I had a 2DS, which was other than the fact that it didn't clamshell fold, was fantastic.
Yeah, the 2DS was the right move for sure. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just not good at it. But I played like the first like 10 minutes of one of the Revelations games, and I was like, whoa! And it was also a first-person game. If I remember
I'll also
correctly.
say, well, we're on the DS here for a minute. The stronger DS titles were the ones that were sort of utilized its quirkiness. And less so like porting 3D games because it can do 3D or whatever. Sure. Yeah. So I hear you there.
Yeah. Campers. Resident Evil. It's got a lot going for it, and it's not above criticism. And I'm not saying I'm better at it than you. So try to take it easy. Don't take it personally when I say I'm really good at it. Just know that.
Oh, is this one of those fandoms?
Yeah.
Oh shoot, yeah. I'm deleting this. We're not. I'm just kidding.
No. The speedrun forums for Resident Evil are incredible because people have this down to pixel perfect. I mean, like any other game that you can speedrun, like the inputs are like they are literally mechanized. Like they are just like you have to take, and you see the times and like they are splitting like milliseconds in terms of who gets the best run.
Please don't make fun of me in the comments based on my gameplay footage.
But be sure to like and subscribe. Campers, that's all for today. Join us next time. I would like to dedicate our next recording session, Josh, to talking about the Keeper's Diary, this fan film that was recently made. It's short and it's on YouTube. And because I want to interact with this Resident Evil community on a more intimate level. I love you guys. I am one of you. Have you heard the words for the last like 2.5 hours that I've been saying? I don't know how long.
It's been about 2 hours. Yeah.
Like I am very much in love with Resident Evil, and if you've got any particular favorites in the series, be sure to let us know. I am curious, genuinely, what games like resonate the most with diehard fans of the series. For me, it's Resident Evil 2 all day, every day for the rest of my life. Yeah, I love Resident Evil 2, 1998. And when we talk about Resident Evil 2 Remake 2019, I'm going to really trauma dump on you guys about how important Resident Evil 2 is to me.
What was I going to say? It doesn't matter. Sean was talking about being one of you. I hope it's coming off that I respect you. I did not enjoy your first game.
Well, the remake. You didn't enjoy the first remake.
I probably wouldn't enjoy the original either. I would have appreciated it more from an art direction perspective, but I don't think I'd enjoy the process of playing it.
I would say that the Resident Evil remake 2002 is one of my least favorite in the series. Mm-hmm. I much prefer Resident Evil 1996 or the Resident Evil Director's Cut 1997.
I blew it.
Or the Resident Evil DualShock Edition 1998. Like, I would choose that over this any day.
I mean, maybe I you know what's funny is like after my first stream for 2 or 3 hours, however long I went, I was like, I had like a ROM downloaded. I was like, should I have just played this on an emulator with save states? Would I have been much happier?
Yes, you would have.
Oh well.
Save states are a good thing. Auto save is a blessing.
Because we didn't mention that being able to save. This is something they just totally just. I'm sorry, this was not innovative or interesting. That a spot in your inventory had to be taken up to be able to save your game. It's just. I get what you're trying to do. It's all it is doing is just creating like logistical, just busy work.
Yes, it is.
I wish I'd said that earlier.
I completely neglected to mention the item box or the saving mechanisms, but like it's they wanted it to. Well, first and foremost, a lot of these decisions were made to simply because of the time that the original game was made in 1996. Let's see, how do I say this? They wanted to make the game more difficult so that people would buy it instead of renting it.
Mm-hmm.
And the American version of Resident Evil is way more difficult, and they had to tweak it as they re-released. Because don't forget, this is Capcom, the same people who made Street Fighter 2 a million times.
Yeah.
They have made Resident Evil so many different times in different ways, and they always tweak it a little bit differently. And the amount of ink ribbons that you can get in a single pickup differs from version to version, and it's just it's all very it's cumbersome when you try to manage the inventory while also trying to survive a zombie apocalypse, while also trying to save your game and also maintain a social life.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there was probably something related to like, oh, I spent all this time going to here and then realized, oh, the thing I need is back in the box, and I was just like, I'm out. I'm done. Okay. Like something like that, right?
I know we were about to sign off, but this is
up.
something that I want to address with Resident Evil, because I know that you dislike the concept of backtracking.
Mm-hmm.
And in Resident Evil, there is a lot of like physical backtracking, but I always saw this is an exploration. Like, no matter what, even if you go through a room, you might have missed something. And there's just like, and yes, this is still coming from my 10-year-old brain where this was the game that I had.
Yeah.
And big psychological reason I think I'm super, super in love with Resident Evil. It's because my parents hated it. This was one of the first video games that my parents
the key to
said,
the gate, folks.
They said you're not allowed to play Resident Evil. And I was like, I'm going to play Resident Evil for the rest of my life.
Yeah, my parents hated all video games, so it was all rebellion for me.
Yes.
That's a very astute observation. And I like this, again, I think I respected and validated that by saying earlier, like, if this was the game I had, I get it. I get you'd want to live in this mansion and find every little nook and cranny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same with Final Fantasy VII, where it's like, I mean, and that was such a gift, where it's just like, you get this incredible, gigantic world, and there's even like hidden places. Like there's hidden rooms and hidden dialogue, and so spooky, so cool, so fun. Campers, we did it.
Yeah.
We talked our way through a lot of Resident Evil. Hope you enjoyed. Give us a follow, give us a subscribe, a like. Tell your friends. We want more campers here at Camp Video Games. Join us over at patreon.com/campvideogames. And you can listen through a pretty hefty catalog of commentary on the Legend of Zelda animated series, and access to Junior Counselor Josh's gameplay footage after it's gone live on youtube.com.
Yeah, I gotta get some more of that up there.
Yeah, man, it's fun.
I haven't really done it I haven't put it up for the new season of episodes as of this recording.
And if you feel like we deserve your patronage through patreon.com, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
If you survive
Resident Evil.
If you'd like to write to us, send a message to campvideogames@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram @campvideogames. If you want to become a real happy camper, you can support Camp Video Games on Patreon. For $5 a month, you'll be granted access to even more discussions about movie-based video games, game-based movies, full-length commentaries, playthroughs, and more. Whether you sign up or not, we're glad to have you here at Camp Video Games.